All right, I've started recording.
So then we, spectrum of competition, right? People tend to come about 5 minutes late to this class.
Yeah, is it because there's a bus? Is there a bus here that comes late?
Yeah.
They always blame on the bus, the Lime
Yeah,
bus.
I get that or the train, sometimes if they're coming across town.
Cool. And to Montgomery Hall apparently too, because they all are late. Anybody going to Montgomery Hall with their any ITGM or animation or visual effects? Got a lot of animators, obviously, right? Yeah. No game developers in here? Yeah.
Yeah.
You're the cool kid in here. Yeah.
Graphics design.
Cool.
Graphics, I was thinking this game.
Any gamers? What do you guys play?
I've been playing a lot of Repo.
Uh-huh. What else?
Playing Elden Ring.
Elden Ring? What else?
Monster Hunter.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
We're playing Mass Effect Trilogy.
that's the trilogy. Cool. Okay, so you guys like very big, immersive, cinematic narrative stuff. Cool. Anybody program or mod? Make stuff? No Minecraft folk in here? I mean, Minecraft, of course, it's basic, right? Okay, well, I guess I'll get started. So I'm gonna kind of like loosey-goosey this one. My name is Nye. My students call me Professor Nye. So if you got a question, go ahead and raise your hand. Just say Nye. You know, I'm hoping to kind of promote a conversation about some stuff with you guys. I will get this out of the way so it's not so distracting. And it should be recording what I say up here as well. So that's good. So I want to talk about a little bit about me and how I got into artificial intelligence to start with, because I've been spending a lot of time with it. And then I want to talk about what it is and why you guys need to be paying attention to it. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how I really think it's going to be extraordinarily disruptive to a lot of verticals. And so you need to start thinking about it in different ways, but also understand, since you're doing economics, how are we going to go into the economics of AI? What is the value in an AI system or in an agentic system is what we're gonna chat a little bit about. But to start with, I actually started as an animator. So I am of like mind for a number of you. My first movie was called Monster House. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie. I did a lot of the mocap cleanup and the character chowder on that. I then went to work at Disney Imagineering, where I worked on a couple of attractions. If anyone's been down in Florida to work on the to see the Monsters Inc. laugh floor, I animated some of the monsters on that. I also worked at a company called Blur, where I did some game cinematics for a little while. So I did a lot with motion capture and also keyframe, if you guys know what that means. Motion capture was very big for me because it was a very technical thing and not a lot of people wanted to do it, but I did it and I embraced it and I got really, and so everyone knows what motion capture is, wearing those suits and then being able to record into the computer. Motion capture was one of the early opportunities to start playing with what's called machine learning, which is a way that you can teach a mathematical model how to remember things, which is the critical component of artificial intelligence. And so I started getting into machine learning work a long time ago. So one of the things that I say about my career in general is that I always worked, right? So when animation started going to Canada, because I was in Los Angeles, when animation started going to Canada, I started doing motion capture. A lot of my friends didn't, and then they had to go to Canada to be able to chase work. I also went after pre-visualization work, which is sort of up in the beginning of the pipeline where you're developing shots and concepts. That work stayed in Los Angeles. And then also I started using game engines very, very early. So if you use game engines, like that's sort of the evolution of the whole industry. So I would say the same thing with AI is that there's sort of an evolution happening, and the opportunity is to kind of be at least functional with it and understanding how to embrace it and put it into your process, because that's going to help you be competitive in the job market. Okay. So that's me in a nutshell. So, and then I've been at SCAD for about 5 years. They asked me to come and be the associate chair of game development. So I was very excited about that. I did that for a little while. And then for about the past year and a half, I've been the chair. So if anybody is interested in doing games, we have game jams regularly. We have a noob jam in the fall. We also have the game jam in January. We also have beta day tomorrow, which is a big event for us. We have 14 game teams. So when I started, we were shipping about 4 games a year. Now we're shipping 14 games a year. So I'm very excited for ITGM's development. Okay, so let's talk quickly about what is it? When I say artificial intelligence, what is it? What do you guys think of? Yeah.
I'd say like primarily generative AI, but also like the way that it's been implemented in like medical fields and engineering and things, detecting stuff that the human eye can't necessarily see.
Okay.
Like in those.
Okay, so in broad terms, what would AI be? What is it? What is it? What is it? Because I want to know what context it is in your brain. How many people hate it? Okay, I hate it too.
Oh, I'm so with AI, but it's just that I hate AI art.
You hate AI art. What do you hate about it?
There's just nothing so think about it.
Okay,
You can tell that whenever there's AI art involved, it tries to replicate an art style, but there's just something so off.
got it. Cool. Anybody else want to do a definition? Give a definition for me. Any definitions of AI? So AI is a science and is like a computer science. It's been around since in the 1950s, right? So what we've been seeing recently is generative AI. Okay, but the field itself has been around for extremely very long time. It's basically when you have a computer or a computer program operating on itself and making decisions. Okay, so if you create a series of processes and you allow a computer program to make decisions, that is artificial intelligence. Let me go old school for you guys a little bit here. What is that?
Bingo.
Pac-Man ghosts. Excellent. Who has not played Pac-Man? Excellent. Great. So we can use this example. So Pac-Man is a really cool game where you're moving around and you're moving a guy around, but there's these things here that are doing what? What are the ghosts doing to Pac-Man? Chasing him. Great. So we can say that the decision for the ghost is chase. What do you think the program looks like, even just in English? What does the program for chasing Pac-Man look like? Any guesses? No? Do you think we can get Pac-Man's location? What do you think Pac-Man's location is? Go ahead.
Follows.
It follows. Yeah, I mean, that's great. So like Pac-Man has an X and a Y condition. You guys done the Cartesian coordinate system yet? Right? So Pac-Man has a number. Okay. So there are algorithms. How many people use Google Maps? That uses AI, right? So the ghost here has a chase command that chases after Pac-Man's position. So it's able to chase. Okay. Does it always chase Pac-Man? What else happens?
When you use the berry, they run away.
Right. So there's a flee state. Okay. So if Pac-Man has no pellet, chase. But if Pac-Man does have pellet, flee. Okay. I know this is very, very rudimentary, but in itself, this is one of the earliest cases of artificial intelligence. This kind of decision-making process is called agentic because it gives a character or a thought process agency. Does that make sense? So essentially the ghost is an agentic thing. It's a very, very simple one. There's only a couple of state machines, but it is still making a decision. So that state machine, I would say, is very, very early on in the field of AI, the state machine. There are lots of these sort of mathematical constructs that you utilize to create these kinds of thinking. And about 20 years ago, they came up with one that's called a neural network. And the thing about a neural network is that it is a series of operations that are called neurons. And these are like activation units, right? So have you ever gotten close to something and it can detect that it goes boop, boop. So there's a whole series of activation units here. And when you feed insane amount of data into these series, it learns the settings. It says, oh, I will activate if this setting, right? So it tightens the weights and biases of a neural network. And it creates a mathematical construct, a mathematical model that can remember and learn. So if you have a stop sign, for example, if you send it tons and tons and tons of pictures of stop signs, which is what they do when they're training self-driving cars, it will learn what an edge is. It will learn what a corner is. Well, that's dramatic. It will learn the color. It will learn the letters. And eventually, after learning and learning and learning and learning and learning, it will say, hey, that's a stop sign. Okay? So you can teach math to remember. This is incredibly transformative, right? A lot of people are like, oh, yeah, it's just a tool. I think it's far, far beyond that. A hammer doesn't learn, but AI does learn, and you can teach it to do things, which is going to be incredibly transformative to what it is, okay? So let's talk about computing in this, and I'll talk about the parts in just a minute. If you guys have questions, by all means, jump in, raise your hand, let me know. So anybody written software, tear, cracked open a computer program ever? Okay, kinda. So computer programs tend to be hierarchical. Anyone built a website? Right? So you have like an index.html, and then you have sort of subset. This is what's called a hierarchy. The vast majority of our computing up to this point has been, in fact, most of it currently is that right now. We're entering an era, though, where individual nodes will be able to have autonomous control of their own instance and will communicate with different things. So what's happening to our world right now, as the thunder and rain comes down, is that we have a whole bunch of computing that has been designed in this hierarchical method, but we're discovering vast production efficiencies by changing the way that we build software. Okay, I know this is very abstract in a lot of ways, but you have to understand that this is a foundational change in the way computing is going to happen all across. Okay. See if you guys are still tracking. All right. So the structure of an AI app, who has used generative AI? Just see a show of hands. What kind of stuff? ChatGPT? Images?
Like storyboarding.
Just storyboarding? Okay. So we're still very early in the development of AI, and what that generally is there's a big computer in the cloud, right? We'll call it the cloud. This could be a Microsoft server, an Amazon server, various things, and then you make a request to one of these AI models, and it inferences, it's called inferencing, and it generates a result. Okay. For the most part, you are just querying ChatGPT or Anthropic or some sort of service. But now they are what's called exposing those services through application programming interfaces, APIs, that will allow you to build as a business. So let's say this is OpenAI. I can build a business and run ChatGPT through that software, train a localized train, and then do this. So I can have ChatGPT, and then maybe I'm a comedy writer and I've trained it on a whole bunch of comedy, and it can generate, I've now created a comedic bot that has levity, right? You are no longer creating a hierarchical set of stacks. You're creating a model, and then you are training your aspect into it. You're adding your data into that. Okay. That's going to be profoundly disruptive because most of our business models are SaaS, software as a service. And now you're talking about data as a service and a change. Okay. I could go pretty deep on that, but I'm going to leave that one there because I want to talk about how this is going to affect you as artists. Okay. So storyboarding artist, I think, is great. That's a great way. So let's say there's a story that you have to write, and then there's like a board pass. Okay. And then what would you do here? Character development maybe, or like, I don't know, animation, editing. These are all a workflow. This is a workflow. AI will then come in an agentic capacity, an intelligent capacity, and you will apply AI to these aspects, right? So by writing a story, you might start by creating 15 outline points, feed it to an AI, and then it will come back with like 5 written pages. You'll then take that and then say, I want that page. That page is the best one. And then it will create 150 different boards. And then from that, you will animate 2 or 3 of them. You're going to be much more of an editor or a DJ in this process. And so the volume of content that you can create will go up much higher, right? So as opposed to an animator's job where you go and you work for Disney, or you go for work for Pixar and you're responsible for 3 seconds a week, it's probably more likely that you're going to be on a small team putting together a YouTube channel and creating content and then working on your IP and your merch that go along with it, right? I think it's going to be smaller teams that are going to be creating more amount of content. So your focus should be on what SCAD, I think, is really good at, which is storytelling, putting things together, optimism, and then finding those business models that are more about being on a smaller team, producing more content, and then that you can control the intellectual property, right? So this is what's called an agentic workflow. And those of you who do animation, you're going to talk about your workflow pipelines, your workflow processes. Certainly in game development, we have workflow. You have your real-time workflow, your art pipeline workflow. There are just lots and lots of workflow. If you go to systems, service design or UX, all the systems design, you know, that's all going to be disrupted as we put agentic, which is the ability to make decisions, into the workflows. So for example, an agent will look at your inbox and then decide these are SCAD related emails, these are marketing related emails, these are workflow requests, and they will put them into different trees of operations, which will have different AI associated. And for the workflow request, it will write the student back, right? You're finding all the things that are on your day-to-day and you're automating the things to be able to give yourself the time back. So this is an incredibly loaded and both exciting and also scary proposition, because it means that teams will become potentially smaller or responsible for more, but also it's up to you as artists and creatives to defend the things that matter most. You have to insert yourself into the process and talk about the things that really matter, which is spending enough time on story, putting the creativity in that you need to put into. There's also a lot of ethical challenges in terms of, you know, data scraping, whether they're taking your data, things like that. But there's not been a single company that I have talked to that is not pursuing agentic workflows for all of the fields that you're talking about. So it's something that you just need to keep open for your mind. Okay. So let's talk a little bit in my remaining time before I get to questions on what is the value proposition in artificial intelligence. So you're in economics class. What is the value in our world? What makes the world go round besides love? Money, right? Okay. Okay, so what does money represent? Yeah. Security, interesting. Okay, for you mean having it security, okay. What about in capitalism? How do you generate value in capitalism? There's three commonalities that you often hear in capitalism. What? Branding? Interesting. Not quite. How do you make money in a capitalist world? How do most people make money in a capitalist world? Huh? Business, and what does a business do? Selling what? Goods and services? Okay, so generally it's land, labor, and capital, the three things. There's more. We're gonna put land off to the side. Labor is the one I want to talk about. Okay, what do you think AI is doing to labor? Yeah. Diminishing, is it? Maybe it's making it more highly productive. We don't know, right? And this is an important conversation for us to have. Okay. When labor gets diminished, what do you think happens to an economic system that's based on it? I don't know the answer to this either, but I'm just asking if you guys do. If you don't have labor, if you read Adam Smith, he says labor is a really big part of it. What happens when a lot of people don't have labor? Yeah, I think you're going to see some economic shakeout. So if money and labor are going to be in question, what is the value of agentic AI computing? We know that the computing is now changing. It's going from hierarchical into peer-to-peer. We're changing an economic model, okay? So there are three parts of an AI model. This is the architecture. This is the mathematical architecture, right? So Llama by Meta is an architecture. ChatGPT has an architecture, right? No one in this room and no one without a PhD can probably put together a mathematical architecture. These are models that work. However, you need to feed them with lots and lots of data. Okay? And then this creates an output. So this is the model. This is the data. So this in itself, we already know that this is incredibly valuable. Why is data valuable? Why is your data valuable? Yeah.
It contains information that you're not necessarily going to get from us, like day-to-day or in-person interactions.
Yep. What constitutes data? Your data. What is your data as artists? 100%. Like what? What would be data? What programs do you guys work in? Maya? Photoshop? Illustrator? Do you save that up in the cloud? Is it on Dropbox somewhere? Are you giving it to Google? Yeah. So that in itself is something you should always be aware of. And then this in itself requires, I'm just going to use the word compute. This is the energy and the ability for a GPU, an NVIDIA GPU, to run an AI model to create an output. So I just told you that every company is scrambling to use an agentic workflow to speed up their process. How much of this do you think they're spending right now? A lot, right? So this, I believe, is your economic pillar that you need to be looking at. Okay, as we move into a world where computing is changing from a hierarchical thing that a small number of companies are dominating to a networked one, you're going to see massive amounts of compute. So I'm just going to give you real fast three models. that I see are happening. The first one, I'm gonna call this centralized. This is Microsoft or OpenAI, Anthropic, Amazon. They have all the computing. They have all the power. You basically pay them and then they serve it directly to you. This is 99% of what or probably more than that. This is of what the world is right now. The second one, though, is open source. This is open source. Yeah,
It means that you can see, like, any customer, consumer, or person that can access that network can see every single part of that network and see how it works.
why is that important?
Because if your data is being used, you know, a lot of consumers will want to know how and why it's being used. And
Yeah. So if you noticed, Meta or Facebook open sourced Llama. So now you can have your own AI model and run it locally. So there's a lot of people who are building businesses because they have given us these models to be able to do. But you still need compute here. So even though they are giving us data and open source models, you still need compute. And then this is the last one, which I'll call edge. But essentially, there is a growing world where shared resources are being utilized. So Airbnb, right? 20 years ago, if someone said, I'm going to sleep on someone else's couch and then I'm going to pay them for it, you would have laughed at me. Or I'm going to get out in a car that someone's going to pick me up because I summoned them on an app. No one would ever believe. But we are going to start sharing more resources because we can't afford huge GPUs. Even the big guys, the Amazons and the Microsoft. Microsoft just bought a nuclear reactor because they're trying to find ways to power these computational things. So distributing computing amongst everyone's computing systems and the data that will go with it, the sharing economy. So we're sure that this exists, but these two are going to rapidly evolve. So those of you who want to do indie stuff, who want to do your own YouTube channel content, or you're going to be making games and you're going to be independent in making games, or you're going to try to brand yourself for some sort of up-and-comer band or whatnot, you probably should be looking at how the AI world is going to move away from just money and into computing and sharing of resources. Okay. So I think I'll stop there. It was super fast, but I got everything out that I wanted to talk about that. And I'll leave it for questions. My final statement is that you should understand your creative workflow. What is it that you have? Because you guys are all developing a workflow as artists and creatives. And then start thinking about, like, what are the ways that you can optimize that? How can you make that faster and better? Because that's going to be your unique value proposition as an artist going into the world that we live in. Okay, I got a few minutes for questions. Yeah.
This might be like outside of kind of your field in a way, but like something that I've thought a lot about is like the environmental implications of
Oh,
AI,
yeah,
like,
for sure.
massive computing power.
Yep.
I'm just wondering if you have any specific insight about, like, you know, these massive like power plants and all of this power and things like that, that's not necessarily being actively used, but more
Right.
like a passive thing.
Yep.
If you can see how that's gonna affect
So,
environmentally and things like that.
This is where I'm spending most of my research time on, and what I've been playing with is systems that use idle processing power. So you guys all have computers at home, probably aren't being used right now. Imagine if we all connected those and then we all were being able to utilize that. What if we all had bikes? We all had bikes outside. And then if I needed a bike, you would let me rent your bike. I think that kind of sustainability that we're thinking about in terms of technology. I've also worked with a couple of nonprofit organizations that work on entirely donated computing. So people donate their computers. It's amazing. Even 10-year-old computers, we reboot them with Linux. You can put them into, like, you know, your local YMCA and get people access to the internet. And I think that kind of mindset of shareability and shareability of computing resources is probably the answer to that question. There's a lot of people, especially in things like science research, like the Amazon rainforest, people are all using shared computing resources. There's a organization in Berkeley that's called BOINC, that uses shared resources for computing. So I think those lead to this kind of world that we're moving in, and potentially away from us spending billions of dollars on centralized computing. Good question. Anyone else? Thoughts?
Now, one quick question I have, could you give them a little bit of color from some of the comments you've gotten from employers and those utilizing this generative type or applications for the workflow?
Yeah.
Somewhat of a color for a couple examples, maybe?
Yeah, so out of my department, I had a team that used AI for animation in the game. They used a software called Cascador to be able to move characters. These weren't animators, these were game developers, and they used Cascador in the game. They created a whole pipeline. They documented their process. And instead of going to the employer and being like, we cheated, we used AI for animation, we said to the employer, we cheated and used AI for the animation. Here's our documentation. Here's how we implemented, and that pipeline is now in that game company's usage. They are all looking for ways to be able to optimize and move faster, right? And so by you being that creative person who can find ways to smash them together, your value is in that problem solving. I have students who come in and want to be game developers, and they go to Gulfstream. They'll take their skills that they learn in game development, and they'll go into an airplane industry, and they'll build an airplane in the game engine, and then they'll solve problems for that. So the skill sets that you have as creatives, as storytellers, as designers who can problem solve, you should write and record your process. And when you come into these interviews, you say, yes, I'm thinking about AI in these contexts. Here's my documentation to prove it. That's the most valuable thing. I think it's not a disservice, but very often we say to you at SCAD, it's all about your portfolio. You just got to get that perfect portfolio. And I actually think it's about showing your process and your writing and how do you solve your problems. 100% everything I hear from employers are, give me a nice kid who can pitch me an idea, go back to their desk. I don't care how they do it, prototype it, mock it up, develop it, come back and pitch it again. It's really about being on your feet, knowing how to solve the problem, and then going and using the tools that you have to be able to solve that problem specifically, AI or not. Yeah.
I'm always telling them that they need to add value to their client or their boss in some way, like this, using their skills, solve a problem, add value right then.
And your unique value. How do you, as an animator, how is you as a storyboard artist? You have a question? Yeah.
I don't know, like, no one else with that, but, there was this whole section about how you're allowing AI to be used as a tool, but you still need to have like your foundational skills.
That's correct. Yes.
I just want to know your perspective on like, if you use AI as a crutch, I guess, doesn't that weaken your skills? Like you'll still have the foundational knowledge, but if you use AI, I want that lesson your skills.
How's your math? Not that good? Do you use a calculator? Do you think your games are going to be good or bad because you use a calculator? I know it's a weak analogy, but I think that is 100% is like, you still need to know what the math is because you need to know how to punch it into the calculator. But the outcome itself, right? If you just put it into generative, if I just make an essay and it comes out, I'm going to have a standard generic essay. But if I really spend the time to craft it and then like make 5 copies and then edit it down and then regenerate this and reuse it and then do all the research, and then the outcome is like 5 times better, then I think it is used correctly. And I think that's the subtle difference. And you should be documenting all of that. Hey, I used Llama and then I searched this and I did that and I used Claude and this is my outcome. Cool. I think one more question. Yeah.
Thing about stuff and sharing. Do you think part of that economy would be like share will become a form of like currency in a way?
Yes. Yeah, I don't know how that's going to look. And I mean, I've come a couple of times and spoken about blockchains. They have pros and cons, but I think that the whole concept of tokenizing value in different ways is probably going to gain traction in some ways, whether or not it's blockchains. Everything will be tokenized. your intellectual property, your energy, your computing, because I think we're just gonna get super hyper granular about our sustainability. That's a hypothesis, but that's what I spend a lot of time prototyping these kind of new emergent technologies, because I'm very big on this as a creative medium. Cool.
Excellent.
Want me to wrap it up for you, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Here we go.